Yay.
I just have the key. Hey, we need to get that fixed, by the way. So that illegal, committing illegal.
I've already done it.
So she's doing that.
I'm down to go back to it. I'm so sick that I get parts one time. I didn't know what the hell that.
Okay, these are the wrong forms. Linda's gonna bring the right.
Oh. It's okay.
I thought it said Dr. Spencer Baker, soprano, my glasses. Dr. Baker studied with Christine Sykes. Oh, we have.
Yes, we have.
Charlie, sorry. Right.
Oh, no, I'll sweat the small stuff.
Oh, Andre Campeo, I know him.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That is funny. Yeah, I don't know him, but his paper was, I really liked it.
Yeah, he
It
was.
was when I read and I was like, oh, that's how it works. That's what I do, and I didn't know that I did it. So,
Yeah, he was at Ames one summer.
that's so cool.
I know Marcia Porter too.
Yeah.
You remember Andre Campeo?
Oh, yeah, that's right, yeah. Long time ago. Long time.
I'm attending a recital in the past, I didn't realize.
What?
May 2021.
Oh my God.
And you know what? I actually proved this.
I got your back. I'm younger. Thank you.
want to
Always mistakes.
You know what, Dr. Lister, if you keep catching all the mistakes, we're gonna send you all the things.
That's all right, we totally understand. We're always living in the past 2 or 3 years ago.
I seriously have to think about it. It made me stop and wonder what your was, that's why.
No, I wrote 21 so many times this year, it's funny. Is there a reception after? I just don't know.
Yeah, the reception is my girlfriend's.
Another one is out, yeah.
Claudia, could you turn off the light?
Which one is it?
Whichever turns off, thank you. Welcome to a performance guide for 4 songs by Francisco Mignone. The standard art song repertoire originated throughout Italy, France, England, Spain, Germany, and in the US case, the United States. Yet the art song performance canon is expanding as we see singers performing art songs from countries such as Norway, Sweden, Czech Republic, Russia, and diverse dialects from Catalonia, Argentina, and Cuba, among others. It is important to explore music from countries outside the standard repertoire to discover their beauty and cultural richness, and because there are many great repertoire that remain unknown outside of their countries. In South America, Brazil is the largest country by territory and population, and is known by its musical diversity reflecting several cultures, such as, but not limited to, African, European, and Amerindian. There is a plethora of Brazilian art song repertoire generally unknown in the United States. This presentation will explore 4 vocal pieces by Francisco Mignone, No Meio do Caminho, Pregão, Eu Sei Que Saudade, and Valsa-vocalise. Each of them exemplify expressions of Brazilian national identity. Francisco Mignone is considered one of the greatest Brazilian composers, and his large body of vocal works is acclaimed for expressing a variety of Brazilian musical styles. So his compositional style can be divided into 3 main periods. As a precursor to his first phase, when he was young, he started composing popular music, and at this time, classical music didn't really mix up with popular music. He always said that society deemed those who wrote popular music as negatively frowned upon and even disqualified. So he used his pseudonym Chico Barra to compose in popular music style. In 1920, he received a scholarship to go to Milan to study, which marked the beginning of his first compositional style. He studied with the Italian composer Vincenzo Ferroni, who introduced him to French compositional techniques, as well as the Italian operatic tradition. Under Italian influence, Mignone continued to explore, in Italy, he continued to explore Brazilian subjects, but because of the use of romantic harmonies and structures, his European training was very clear in his music. Prior to his return to Brazil, Mignone's opera L'Innocente premiered in Rio de Janeiro in 1928. Mário de Andrade, who was one of the leaders of the Brazilian nationalist movement in the arts, criticized the composer by saying, "I have to admit that today's situation about Francisco Mignone is distressing. We are at the point of losing him, a useful Brazilian talent, an essentially dramatic musician, endowed virtually with European culture, and completely influenced by Italian prototypes. Francisco Mignone faces a pathetic situation. He does not find librettists who can provide national subjects. If he finds them, there will be another problem to solve before the work may be staged. The libretto shall be translated into Italian because nobody sings Brazilian Portuguese. L'Innocente belongs to Italy. Brazilian music remains the same before and after this opera. That is why I consider Francisco Mignone's case so sorrowful." So after this critic, Francisco Mignone moved back to Brazil, to Rio de Janeiro, and he completely changed his style, composing with Brazilian rhythm and Brazilian language, and tried to bring all of his influence of his period as Chico Barra. And 2 of the pieces we're exploring today are from this period, No Meio do Caminho and Pregão. His third and final phase began in the 1960s when he distanced himself from the nationalist compositional criteria and began to use a 12-tone technique, which later he returned to the tonal system in the 1970s. He began to create his works based on free experimentation, for which he made the use of diversity of compositional processes, aiming at a universal speech, but without giving up Brazilian characteristics. So he declared about his compositional style in that period: "Nothing scares me, and I accept any endeavor as long as I can make music. The important thing for me is the contribution I think I can make to my works. I can write a piece in C major or minor, without pain or embarrassment, as well as elaborate concepts of traditional impressionist, expressionist, 12-tone, stereochromatic, atonal, bitonal, polytonal, and perhaps, if I can, avant-garde music with concrete floats, electronics, or breakers of multiplied soundtracks. So he didn't want to be restricted by the norms, and he just wanted to use all his knowledge to write whatever he wanted to write. And two of the pieces we're exploring are from this period, Saudade and Valsa-vocalise. Now, before everything, I wanted to address a little bit the Portuguese language, and because it's, well, we can't really summarize the language fast. I'm just going to be addressing the nasal vowels and the Brazilian unaccented vowels. So, I use three main resources. These two are the same. It's just this is the original in English, and this was the main one I used. It brings a brief history on the Brazilian Portuguese norms, dating back in 1938 when they first started wanting to standardize Brazilian Portuguese, and take out the regional accents, and even like when can I use the accent from this region and when I cannot. And as a way of making it easier for people outside Brazil be able to sing Portuguese. And the last two resources, Marcia Porter and André Campelo, I use them because they have a really good way of explaining the Brazilian nasal vowel and how it works, so that people can understand. Yeah. So the Brazilian nasal vowels are e, I, o, u.
Can you say that again? Slower so we can.
Okay. E, I, o, u. And I probably over-nasalized them because I'm from Rio. But, so they can be formed either by like the word with the tilde over it, or with an M or an afterwards. So André Campelo, he describes three phases for the Brazilian nasal vowel, which is an oral phase, followed by a nasal phase and a nasal tail. So yeah, the nasal vowel starts not nasal, which is great. Makes everything so easy. And I think what makes it sound Portuguese is when you have the oral phase and the nasal tail. Because French usually has just a nasal phase, like it's just nasal, and then I keep adding nasal tails where it doesn't exist when I'm singing French. So for example, and he even like, this is how he puts, so I thought that was very helpful to understand. So this is the word Índio, which is Indian, and this would be like the IPA. And adding this N I got from Marcia Porter, because at home we don't put the nasal tail because we just know it exists, but we don't. Yeah. So it starts like Índio. So it goes from Índio. So it's not just in and Índio. And another example is the so the word descansa, which is like to rest. Descansa. And then like we have like many different kinds. So like corações, irmãos. It has this motion. Caramba, também, lento. So I got like comparing with other languages. For example, the word inocente, like innocent, in Portuguese, inocente, which in Italian is innocente. So, or like sangue, we say sangue, which in Italian is sangue. So Portuguese has a lot of similarities. We can use Italian, Spanish, and French to help start in the Portuguese, but there are these similarities. Like, for example, French, if we want to say the word chanson, which is canção in Portuguese, if you put a Brazilian to read this, we're going to say chanson. Chanson. It's going to have and for example, like Spanish, we have words that are similar, but they will just be said different, which here is the unaccented vowel. It's casa, which in Spanish is casa, if I'm doing it right. So lastly, the unaccented vowels. So the first one is our upside down now. For usually when it's in the unstressed vowel. So like morena, gota. And I like this chart because it shows how it's like, it's in a darker place, it's not as bright as the Italian are. So it's in which I didn't realize it was in a different placement until I started doing this. Yeah, and so it's in a different placement. And we do like, I think it's funny because we get like a letter A and we turn it to an E. And it's just like, instead of saying que, fome, we say que, fome, dorme, which is the same thing that O becomes a U. So instead of como is como, menino, sorry, I said it wrong, menino. So those are like the little tweaks of Brazilian Portuguese language. And then I'm gonna play a little piece of his opera just for you guys to hear, his first period, since I'm not really singing any songs from that period. So in this opera, we can see more clearly the European influence, which was also the case of another famous composer that we have, Carlos Gomes. He was the first one to make success in Italy, and in Brazil, we're like, well, he composed Italian music. It's harder for us to connect necessarily, because it was all in Italian, and so it was a struggle, which is cool that Francisco Mignone heard the critic and changed the way of his music. So, the first song I chose was the meio do caminho. It's because this is a very famous poem. I think every child learns this poem in school. When I was a kid, I thought it was because it's so repetitive, so it's easy for us to memorize. But this is a poem that was written in 1925 by Carlos Drummond de Andrade. He was also very important in the movement of modernismo and nationalist movement. And the poem was so controversial because of its repetitiveness that like people just thought it was crazy. It's like, how can you put this into and call it a poem? So the poem translated to English is this: in the middle of the way, there was a stone. There was a stone. In the middle of the way, there was a stone. In the middle of the way, there was a stone. I will never forget this event in the life of my so fatigued retinas. I will never forget that in the middle of the way, there was a stone. There was a stone in the middle of the way. In the middle of the way, there was a stone. So I really love this poem. So when I was looking at the music, I thought it was important to see both what the composer thought about his poem, the poet thought about his poem, and what Francisco Mignone gives it, so the singer can make a choice of what does the stone mean. So Carlos Drummond in 1944, when he was talking about this poem, he said, "The aforementioned stone, I will be quite frank, has no meaning, except what people who attack it and are irritated by it give it. It's a simple poor stone, like so many out there, nothing more. The poem, if it can be called that, in which it appears, does not intend to expose any fact of a moral, psychological, philosophical nature. It only wants to say what is written on it, namely, that there was a stone in the middle of the way, and that this circumstance remained etched in my memory. As you can see, it's very little. It's almost nothing, but that's where there is." So, because some people were like, oh, he's saying that the stone is actually a raw, it's like, oh, this is a loss of losing someone. It's like, no, he's a genius. And some people's like, he doesn't know how to write. So it was like all these ideas, and it's just like, it's just a rock, whatever. So this was the poet's opinion, but Francisco Mignone seems to give more meaning to the stone. So first, he marks here slow and monotonous, and I think it's interesting how the voice and the piano are in different time signatures. And the voice starts like philosophizing. While like in the middle of the way there was a stone, and it's like basically saying, "No meio do caminho tinha uma pedra." It's like you're not thinking about anything. You're just like, you have nothing to do, useful to do, so you're thinking about a stone. And then the stone seems to get more meaning because it goes up higher, and it's like, oh, there was a stone. And in the middle section, the piano and the voice are finally in the same time signature. And the time keeps changing as a person is realizing, like, what do I feel about the stone? Is it a good stone? Is it a bad stone? Like, why am I going to remember the stone? And then the third section is basically the same as the first one, but the big difference is here, Mignone does phrasal markings. And I think it's because the stone finally has a meaning, while here, it's just like it's just more like, it's not thinking as a whole, it's just thinking minutely about the stone. So no meio do caminho gives an opportunity for the singers to be able to create their story of what does the stone mean, and it's a huge spectrum, which can mean nothing, can be something great or something terrible. And at the same time, it can help also singers learn to be expressive while singing very repetitive text. The second song chosen was Pregão, which Pregão is a musical style, is a street cry that is practiced all over the world. It's a practice in which a vendor is just advertising his product, offering his services through a sound announcement. Despite the use of pregões in the quotidian life in oral tradition, there are very few written works about it. In Brazil, thanks to chroniclers such as Luiz Edmundo, some records can be found about the existence of these urban voices. And because of those writings, we can analyze the social, economic, and cultural aspects of the population of Rio de Janeiro in the beginning of the 20th century. So this particular Pregão talks about hot pines. So one thing that I think is cool is that the piano is very repetitive, and it has basically two main melodies that keeps playing. And I interpret that as like the noise of people going around, the buses, it's just the street noise. And the singer doesn't have a lot of like markings and dynamics or anything. But it doesn't mean that the singer needs to be singing piano all the time, because the vendor is trying to call attention of people. So what they do is that they keep saying the same thing over and over again, but they try to find different ways, first to call attention of people, and I think second, so they don't get super bored during the day while yelling at people. So they call gente like people, or they say morena, which is like the same as saying young lady. So they're just trying to give reference to people. And it starts in this like slower manner and he puts like triplets and offbeat tempo syncopations, which is something very common and it's one of the characteristics of Brazilian popular music. And then the second section, it goes to a faster tempo, which is just like, which it's like, oh, but it's so hot, it's so hot, it's so hot. It's like so hot, the nuts are so hot. So it's just like, I feel like he just needs, to see if that will call people's attention. Because if you walk in Rio, you're gonna see people doing that. It's just like screaming shrimp, screaming donuts. They're gonna be screaming, trying to get your attention anyhow. So I think that the fun thing about this song is that you need to create that story. And again, it's another song that the singer will have to keep saying repetitive text and make it like not boring. And it cannot be tedious, and it cannot sound like I'm singing an opera. It has to bring a little bit of the street cry characteristic. And then at the end, he marked piano in the back, and then here he just marks yelling, which is oi, which is like, again, calling attention to people. So I think this is a very fun song. Even though it doesn't talk about anything very complex in life. It's just something that is very characteristic of the quotidian life of the working people in Brazil. And you can learn a lot about the people and how those things work. And it's a very good challenge for singers to get out of the formal way of singing and trying to find some freedom in the music. Se eu sei que a saudade, it means if I know what saudade is. So this song is centered on the feeling of saudade, And I find it better not to translate because no translation seems to make it justice. The word saudade can be tracked back to the origins of the Portuguese language, and more specifically to the common theme found in the 13th century cantiga de amor, tradition of poetry, which is songs of cantiga de amigo, songs of friends. And since then, the word became rooted in the language and is continuously used today in all of the countries that speak Portuguese. Drawn from a genuine suffering of the soul, saudade became philosophical speculation, particularly suitable for expressing the relationship of the human condition to time, finitude, and the infinite. So while the word is not translatable, I found this phrase like a good way of trying to summarize it. The present is found in the form of eternity, attached to the past by memory, to the future by desire. So it's that bittersweet emotion of when you miss home, when you miss somebody, or you miss a time that passed. It kind of has all of that encapsulated. And the strongest characteristic of Brazilian national music is the rhythm, which is mainly marked by specific patterns of syncopation and triplets, tuplets, which are inspired in the popular and folk music genres. So a lot of composers tend to use those sort of compositional devices to express the word saudade, as Mignone does in the song. So when they use the syncopation, it helps bring that feeling of longing, pain, and melancholy, while also expressing happiness, which is it's like the bittersweet emotion. So for example, here, Mignone first starts like being an offbeat. On the first time he says saudade, and I think the second one it's like a syncopation. And then on the third and fourth time, he uses triplets. While the piano, I like very much here that the piano is, the piano is doing a different rhythm, which keeps, like, the piano does one rhythm and the voice does a different one, which keeps that sense of it's there, but it's not there. One good challenge of this piece is that it's a very, it gives a lot of freedom. It's not a very hard piece on like when you look at it, but it has a lot of space for the singer to declaim. For the singer to declaim, and also has a lot of parts that the piano doesn't really give support, which those are the big challenges. For example, here the piano is not really helping the voice, and the voice needs to do all this vocal line without missing the pitches. So those are the big challenges. So I really like to see the places where he's word painting the music. So for example, here, he's doing the word like maybe with the vocal line holding the D sharp, while the piano, even though it has here D sharp, the piano is playing what the singer just sung before when saying saudade, which it brings that uncertainty because of the dissonance. It brings that uncertainty, and he tries to express through music what saudade is. And he also like does, for example, here, he tries to word paint the word brisa, which is breeze. So it's like, anime as rosas da brisa. So it's like, it's the breeze moving the plants, right? And here, he also does like, while he's describing morrendo em cada pétala. So the flowers are dying in each petal that falls, and their dreams dies with it. And the piano gives a certainty of like that they are dying, and it just gives a certainty of it in the motion of them falling. What I think is very fascinating about the song is through the moments that the piano gives support. It's like sometimes when you like have the certainty of like, for example, a love you have, but then sometimes when you're remembering it, it's not there anymore, but you have the memory of it and you deal with that uncertainty with, and you keep longing for that time. And I feel like this song really expresses, because the text is not really trying to explain what saudade is. It's really saying like, do I know what it is? Like, it's giving lots of metaphors without really defining it. I hope you like it. It's one of my favorite ones. Saudade, se eu sei o que é, tu duvidas e poderia eu desconhecer essa doce senhora da vida já vivida. Autora te abro doce enquanto vão falando, morrendo, se eu sei o que é saudade, não defino isso sim, esse sentir divino, saudade, meu amor, irmã da ausência, palavra justa. The first song that I chose was Valsa-vocalise. It was dedicated to the singer Maria Lúcia Godoy, just like Se Eu Sei O Que É Saudade, which Maria Lúcia Godoy, she was very famous. She was, well, she is very famous. She's alive. She was considered the velvet voice of Brazil, and a lot of composers compose things for us. And during an interview about this Valsa-vocalise, she was saying how she believes that Mignone honored her with this piece because it's based on the musical genre of valsa, which is waltz, and brings the seresteiro character, which is how she began her career, singing serestas with her family. So serestas, also referred to as modinhas or serenades, were developed in the late 18th century in Brazil. They are characterized by verses and refrain, normally composed in a minor key, to exude melancholy, They were performed in the salons accompanied by piano, guitar, and flute. So regarding the valsa, the vocalise genre, Godoy believes that all songs must be interpreted as if they were a vocalise, as it is always necessary to have a connection to sing a song with a text, with text. Like a vocalise, it's all legato as if it were a vocalise, only has words in the middle, which reinforced the idea that we should maintain legato singing through the phrase and through the consonants and not have the consonants stopping the phrase. The valsa is a musical genre greatly explored by Mignone in his compositions. And another famous poet, Manuel Bandeira, referred to him as the king of waltzes, since he composed a total of 111. Mignone sought to contemplate the various types of waltzes found in the popular Brazilian music: guitar waltzes, pioneiro waltzes, ribbed serenades, or caipirinha chorinhos. Although waltzers were usually a genre for people to dance, his waltzes were not meant to be danced, but to be performed, and they generally allude to the striking bass of the serenade guitar. The waltzes for Mignone, the result of an entire collection acquired in the city, and is aimed at improvisation, serenade, relaxation, and nostalgia. So Mignone's Valsa-vocalise, as the name implies, has the characteristics of a waltz. The melody of the vocalise also brings the characteristics of the seresta, a musical style to which he composed endless works. This is a reflection of also his time composing as Chico Bolero and composing popular music. So the Valsa-vocalise is divided in 3 sections, and the A prime, it's a repetition of A with the coda. The notes in the vocal line of Valsa-vocalise are related and belong to the harmony throughout the piece. The melody is constantly moving, and the rhythm is thoroughly marked by the composer himself, separated through short lines, which is a very difference from all the other pieces where he didn't give a lot of dynamics, he didn't give a lot of rhythm, and here he is micromanaging everything in the whole piece. The melody is formed by arpeggiations, scales, appoggiaturas, and chromatic passages. It creates an agile, smooth, and wavy melody, and the agility required on the song suggests is more appropriate for lighter soprano voice, which Maria Lúcia Godoy was also a lighter soprano. So section A has, it basically has a motion of going up and down on the piano, and on the voice. And the A2, it's a repetition of A1. And it's very interesting, like the voice doesn't start on the beat, but the piano is giving very strongly the 1, 2, 3 of the waltz at all times. On A3, the voice is actually doing the quadruples against the waltz rhythm, which is something very common in popular music for you to just not be in time. So it's to give that sort of atmosphere. And the B section, he says a little bit more alive, so it moves a little bit more. But one interesting thing is that the piano starts playing instead of quarter notes, start playing 8 notes, which already makes it the song moving more, which already creates that impression. And then, and he gives a fortissimo here, which the one part he gives fortissimo, and this is where it's going to the apex of the song, which it culminates in the A flat or A natural. It culminates in the A natural coming down. I think that this is a very interesting song because although the rhythm is very marked, the singer still have places where she can take time. She doesn't have to be all the time following the 1, 2, 3. Like here, there is a lot of freedom, and I really like the coda. He first puts the piano doing a descending line, and then the voice is reiterating the theme from A1, but it's like do assai più lento subito. So it's like do it very slowly and suddenly, and with the piano just holding it, which is something very common also in popular music, just having these moments where you stop the music and the voice just goes and does whatever the voice wants it to do, right? So I think that this is a song that it's so beautiful and it really expresses what it would be when people played and when they were getting the guitar and playing sections and pulses. So I'll have Claudia Affen.
Yes.
Sounds good.
So these four songs of Francisco Mignone explored different aspects of Brazilian soul. And it was very interesting to get two periods I couldn't get more so from his first period. But the first two songs that represented his nationalistic period was when he was inspired by his generation to form part of this Brazilian nationalist movement. The first song, Meio, caminho, focused on a poem that's so intrinsic to Brazilian literature. The second, Pregão, is a song that illustrates the urban life in the big cities of Brazil, with the street vendors advertising their products with melodic like yelling. The last two songs represent his final phase, where he reaches a point of his life where he no longer feels the need to fight any battles and chooses to incorporate all of his knowledge throughout his life in his compositions as he sees fit. So the first song, Se Eu Sei Que É Saudade, Mignone attempts to express through music this overwhelming emotion, since words seem to fail to do so. Valsa-vocalise is also a great piece that gives the singer an opportunity to work in expressivity while singing only in a single vowel. Another reason I chose the vocalise was because it's Brazilian, but it doesn't have Portuguese, so it's more accessible outside of Brazil. So hopefully people will sing more Brazilian composers. So each piece selected has very different characters, which illustrates the richness that it can be found in Brazil, proving the point that music from different countries needs to be explored and performed in order to expand the art song canon. The language factor should not be a barrier impeding people from singing repertoire in Brazilian Portuguese, which is why I found these resources of providing to enable singers, not just Brazilians, to sing in Portuguese. So in sum, singers should continue exploring different composers from different nationalities in order to discover great richness and diversity in the art song genre. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, so, Marla, just a question about in his writings, did he choose, was he really more involved in just writing about his culture a lot? Did he love that part? That's something he pursued to try to present his culture?
Yes, he started writing a lot of compositions in the Brazilian style, and he became a teacher in Rio de Janeiro in the conservatory.
Yeah.
So he influenced a whole generation of composers to bring more of the Brazilian soul into music instead of just being what the Europeans would tell us to do. So
Sure.
bring more the Brazilian popular music.
Did he write for other voice types as well, or did he favor the soprano, or did he just
Yes, he wrote for a lot of voice types, but I just chose the ones mostly for my voice. The Valsa-vocalise, I thought it was a good choice, but it's harder for me. But yeah, he wrote a lot of chamber music. He wrote choral pieces, and he wrote ensemble pieces, and he has a lot of piano, which his wife was a pianist as well, so she ended up until today, she's always playing his pieces, and they have a center in Rio where we're always having concerts there. But yeah, he composed for all voices.
If you had a simple term for us to help remember, if you think of like Copeland, pentonality, Philip Glass intervals, what should we remember?
I think it's the rhythm, how he incorporates the rhythm to his music. So, but I don't know how to. Popular rhythm? I don't know.
Rhythm depicts the culture.
From popular music. Yeah, because that's what I found in all of his songs. He always brings in agrees with me.
Okay.
Yeah, he always brings in, because I think that's the main thing when I hear a lot of his songs of his first period, that you don't have the rhythm strong, like the syncopations and you just don't have that aspect. So it's not as, for me, it's not as fun to sing and to, yeah.
Sure.
In the Brazilian nationalism works that he lists here, the first one says, I'm not going to pronounce it, it's an M. Chico Rei.
Chico.
1934.
1930.
I'm just wondering if that,
Maracatu do Chico Rei.
yeah, does that actually like, is that King Chico? Is that referring to the
No, it's
first
not.
influence?
No, it's unnecessary. Okay. Maracatu do Chico Rei. É coisa africana, né? Sorry. Yeah, it's more connected to the African oranges, so it's based on the African one. I don't know who Chico Rei, but mistake of mine. Because that was a very important piece for him to show his popular compositional style. He used a lot of, he's researched in indigenous music, he researched the African influence music, yes.
Can I add something? So
Please.
Chico Rei was a king in Congo,
In common.
brought to Brazil as a slave, which was very common at the slavery time. They would bring kings and whoever was in African countries. And in one of the states in Brazil, Minas, there are many, I think he went to Minas as to a golden mine, to work as a slave in a golden mine, is that what we call?
Yeah.
And he's very known actually, and maracatu is just a rhythm, a Brazilian rhythm originated from African music and rhythms. So that's what it means basically. So maracatu, Chico Rei is the king. Chico maracatu is a rhythm dedicated. It's a song or a piece dedicated to that personality.
We're done. Claudia, come here.
Oh.
Well, I would like to thank Claudia and thank you so much. I really hope more people explore Brazilian music in all other kind, like we have other countries in the world, so I hope people explore them. Stop.